Good morning, everyone. We're glad that you could make it to the third week session of our Zen Garden series, conducted by our very own Alan Clements from Cascades Gardens. So we have a couple more weeks to go, and I hope that you will be able to tune in. I know that most of you have tuned in for most of the talks. Good morning, everyone. We're glad. Sorry about that. And we'll be continuing. And also we are hoping to, Alan maintains his garden, as you all might know already. And he hopes to turn it into a retreat center where we could go and sort of conduct retreats. And we are very much looking forward to, in the very close coming future, to visit Alan at his garden and hold a meditation Vipassana session at Cascade Gardens, and Alan is looking forward to having us, I know, as well. So Alan, without much further ado, I'm going to hand over the session to you. And yes, looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Alan.
Okay, we're just pressing all the right buttons. Host disable. Banti, have you disabled the screen sharing?
Oh, no, I have not, but I'm going to allow you to screen share now, Alan. Yes, you can screen share now. Yes.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to talk with you today. I have one or two things to say. Firstly, an apology that sadly our studio wasn't set up sufficiently technically to be able to do a bonsai demonstration today, but I'm very keen to do that on the next occasion in a month's time. The other thing is that this presentation was done very much with beginners in mind, beginners to mindfulness and meditation. And I know that most of you are experts, but the good thing is that while I go through at the end, I'll ask some questions, and maybe you can help me with my own study and practice. That might be fun to have some questions at the end and some advice. Thank you. Well, what I had in mind today is we have many visitors to the garden all the time, every day. And they all say, well, what on earth inspired you? What gave you the motivation to create this 4-acre garden and last for 25 years doing it? And how did you design it? Everyone expects me to have had a professional designer, sort of people that you see at Chelsea Garden Show. But no, it was absolutely my own creation. Well, I've been learning about mindfulness in the last year or two, particularly during lockdown, although I realized that I've been engaged in that for quite a long time. And more now, the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Show and Society, are talking about horticultural therapy. I'm going to touch on that. And then finally, meditation in the garden. Well, what sort of things do I do still after 50 years of trying to do it and experiencing it and getting some benefits? So what inspired me? Well, about 50 years ago, I read a very interesting book. It was called Thus Spake Zarathustra by Nietzsche, the famous German philosopher. And I've still carried this thought in my mind. I can't forget the words. Look, a philosopher alive with thoughts. See how his eyes gleam. Only the truth sparkles. And I've gone through with that thought all my life. And I've enjoyed those moments of inspiration, time to time, that come and inspire me to do things in my life. What is inspiration? Of course, it's all about giving that sudden awareness of possibilities of what you could do, a much greater, broader vision. And it sort of gives you a bit of a springboard to get creative and helps you get on with it. And I've always found that that sort of ingredient, that inspiration, has been so important in my life year on year to keep me going. To have a purpose, to have doing something meaningful because I'm inspired to do it. And specifically, from previous talks that seeing other sacred gardens in Japan in particular, China, India, and so on, has greatly inspired me, not least the Daisen Inn in Daitokoji Monastery in Kyoto. And to such a point this summer, I've actually tried to do my own rather feeble version of it here in a corner of Cascades Gardens. The other thing which I touched on previously is, this idea, everyone talks about being one with nature. And since COVID has come along, I'm getting so many more guests to the garden, and they all brighten up when I say, well, what we're offering here is not so much a garden, but peace of mind, the opportunity to connect with nature, to be one with nature. And I'm still meditating on that, trying to understand exactly what that means. When I started the garden, 1996, 1998, Jeff Hamilton, the sort of Monty Don of the day on the BBC, had a program, and he was giving practical advice on how you can create your own little paradise. And also at the same time, a man called Tim Smith had discovered Heligan Gardens. I don't know whether you've been to that. Heligan Gardens in Cornwall. It was a 70-acre garden that had completely gone into disrepair. The rhododendrons had overgrown, and he spent several years creating and recreating the Heligan Gardens in Cornwall. Quite an inspiration in itself. But there are three pictures that always come to mind when I'm thinking about the beauty of nature and natural landscapes. And this is certainly one of them. When I was in Tibet in 1992, was it? 94. This was the view I first had when I arrived in Tibet, climbing from Kathmandu, 4,000 feet, up to this wonderful view of Everest from the Tibetan side, where we camped at 14,000 feet. Such a majestic picture, I can't resist looking at it. The other view is because of my travels in Northeast India with the Tibet Relief Fund. I did a lot of project work in the 1990s, early 2000s, working on projects as advised by the Dalai Lama. He said, well, we'd like some help in Arunachal Pradesh, in my Tibetan settlements there. Can you help? And I traveled out to that part of the world, and we delivered aid over about 10 years. I was lucky enough to meet the Dalai Lama as a result many times. This was the picture I've always kept and cherished. This was one of the settlements in a place called Tezu in Arunachal Pradesh. Absolutely breathtaking, with the mountains of Tibet, southern Tibet, in the backdrop. And then finally, yes, that garden in Daitokoji Monastery in Kyoto. I visited it in 1996 and also a previous time as well. And without going into any detail, this was a great inspiration to me. One of the most important temples in Kyoto, a monastery, the Academy of Great Immortals, and created in about 1500. An extraordinary small garden imitating a landscape of mountains and the water and the river running through, demonstrated by the raked gravel. Well, how did I design the garden? I obviously looked over that wall that first time and saw its potential. I could hear the dripping water. I could hear the cliffs, see the cliffs in the background. And I just realized, well, this is the garden that could adapt its rocks, its water, and so on to Japanese style gardens. And that was that view. I showed it in the previous talk. That very first view on a very simple camera, looking through the jungle, over the water courses to a cliff beyond. And from the far end of the garden, you may remember this picture looking down towards the house. It's about a 2 acres, like a gorge, really, a 2-acre gorge, looking down to the house. This was the first site I had in 1996. What a challenge to turn that into a garden. After a year or two, we cleared some of the jungle, and looking from the house, this is how it looked. Still, though, a totally blank canvas. Those Leylandii had to go. And what I want to tell you about is a great friend I had in the late 90s. And he was a charming man in those days, in his 70s. It's hard to believe that I'm now his age from 20 years ago. And he was an expert. He was a management consultant that came to visit my factory. I owned a printing factory with 120 people in those days. And he came to help me sort out the people and the culture and try to give it a motivation and a new vision. And he turned out to be a real expert on visioning the future. And I thought it was worth sharing with you today what he had to say, because I've never forgotten, sadly, he's passed now, but he really inspired me. And he was saying, look, it's not just about identifying a goal of where you want to be. It's got to go well beyond that. It's a spiritual thing. And he was very spiritual as a man. By being spiritual, you get creativity and innovation into the dream that you might have. And if you're passionate about it, you can carry others along with you. So, Walter, what is a vision?
Well, if you can plan it, Alan, then it certainly is not the vision. So that still leaves your question of what is it then?
Can you help me?
An image.
Yeah.
An image of sort. As Master Eckhart, the great medieval mystic, has described it, he said, when the soul wants to explore something, it throws an image of the subject it wants to explore in front of itself, and then it enters into its own image. And I think that's still the most appropriate description of an image, of a vision that I can think of. So this fantastic idea that your soul projects an image in front of itself of whatever is of interest it wants to explore, and then enters into its own image.
Well, Walter was very clear, as you heard there, that if you can plan it, it's not a vision. And I have to say that in Cascades Gardens, 4 acres worth, I've never drawn anything down on a piece of paper with this idea that I carried that vision with me. He said it was helpful to think of your vision as developing through stages, a bit like the growth of a human being, from conception, birth, growth, and death. It was interesting that he did actually make people sit down and draw a vision. So this picture on the left-hand side is actually a very large picture, about 10 foot square. And he used to, as a consultant, go work with boards of, for example, British Petroleum. And he had those senior directors sitting down around a table around this huge piece of paper to draw their fantasy, to draw their vision of the future of the company. This one is about my company in those days, but it was quite interesting how expressing yourself on a piece of paper like that actually brought out all sorts of interesting ideas, visions, and issues. He said, well, if a person understands their purpose, they have access to their innermost energies. And yes, I looked up Meister Eckhart, who I hadn't heard of. When the soul wants to experience something, she throws out an image in front of her and then steps into it. Well, the other thing that influenced me in taking me through this project was that I had to mention my mother. She's 90 years old now, sadly towards the end of her life. But she told me that, and I knew every morning she would sit down quietly and listen to God, as she called him. And for 70 years, I know she has done that. Listening to the inner voice, a solution can be found, she thought, to every problem. Well, in my sort of language now, I do understand and agree entirely with her that if you actually listen to what I call the universe, tap into universal consciousness, you can usually find a solution if you're patient. And I often find, particularly in the middle of the night, I sometimes wake up and I find myself channeling ideas about the project that I have in my mind. And it's often very creative and interesting. So my conclusions from this project of 25 years, Cascades Gardens, certainly don't overplan it, but do just go into it. They say, don't they, a journey begins with the first step. Well, just go for it, work with the landscape that you have and let it evolve. I've always found that when I've started a project, it's always better, turns out better than you think it's going to. And work with the landscape. These days, now we've got fairly advanced in the development of the garden. My strategy is pretty straightforward. I go around, I walk my walking meditation every morning. I look for the worst bit, the scruffiest bit, the most weeds, and I make it the best. That's the project of the day. And boy, this has often been the way we've had to start a project with a bit of earth. I sometimes look back and I think, gosh, how did I ever establish this? This has turned out so well, especially after 20 years. And here's a bit before and after picture. The pond, as we found it, filled with sloppy mud, and we turned it into that creation on the right-hand side there. Quite a dramatic change. Here's another one. After we'd crown lifted the beech trees, we created this space, this piece of lawn, and so on, and planting the Catalpa bignanoides, roses and rhododendrons in pots, a whole hosta bed. We managed to get it to that sort of stage. On the canal side, we had a sloping bank. We got it back to grass, as you see on the left, cleared the pond. And we created the structure on the bottom right-hand picture. It's now turned into this lovely lush area. And I can say that this morning, as I sat in front of this, it was just full of flowers, hydrangeas and so on, and a lot of phlox, September flowers. This old hut was the one thing that we inherited from the previous owner. You can just about see it in the picture, the right-hand side. This is how it looks like now. Lots of roses, and it's almost hidden away with the lush planting that we have around it. It's lovely tufa arch, some rhododendrons, lots of shrubs, dripping water. Well, another saying, readings that I did some years back, which sort of drove me on because it was quite scary in some ways trying to initiate this development. But I found this, I was given this by a dear friend. He said, well, this is something Mandela said some years back in his inauguration. It turned out that this was not the case. It was actually by someone called Williamson in a book of 1992, Return to Love. But nevertheless, the passage is still very inspiring. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Do we have the courage? It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. You are a child of God. I was much inspired by that, encouraging people to be their best selves and exceed their expectations, go beyond what they felt they were capable of. I keep that passage with me. Well, let's talk a bit about mindfulness, because this is something, as a meditator for many years and Buddhist, mindfulness was rather a new term to me. And I thought, well, this is just another bit of a gimmick. It's nothing to do with Buddhism. But I realized that, in fact, mindfulness was something that I was very familiar with and had arguably practiced it for some time, but I didn't really know how to express what I was doing, what it was about. And as I know many of you know, it's all about being present. Mindfulness is being present, maintaining a moment by moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations and surroundings. You know, not being on autopilot as we often are when we rush around on our busy day, but actually taking a moment to be still and being and understanding and feeling part of the present. The one thing I didn't really understand so much about mindfulness was that by doing that, perhaps you can force out all those thoughts that sort of crowd in, that sort of massive information overload that we seem to have every day. Not to be aware of those, push them aside, don't be judgmental about your thoughts, and open your heart to what comes. Well, in the garden, certainly all my gardening life, and I've been gardening 60 years, I've always been very in awe of nature and absorbed by nature. And even in that picture on the right there, you can see the hosta bed. Look how many different leaves there are, the shapes, the colors, it's one thing to just say, oh, that's the hosta bed. But actually, when you look closely at the picture, it's just an amazing array of different plants, shapes and forms. So being present means about forgetting past anxieties, not worrying about the future, getting rid of the baggage, if you like, that crowds our lives. Some would call it the attachments. And also I find that by being present like that and being aware of the senses, you can feel much more alive, sensually alive. And of course, this is very good for us, because by filling your mind, being absorbed in nature, you can reduce your stress, forget your stress, and depression, anxiety, even pain in the process. So I'd find it very easy and would urge others to really be much more aware of your garden in all its aspects and not just walk through it quickly. This is a picture of the garden, of course, with its pathways. And wherever you go, there's wonderful light, greenery and lush planting. And you can hear everywhere the soothe trickle of water. Lots of peaceful and secluded places, and every opportunity to be immersed in and celebrate nature. Well, I can honestly say that every day I have a walking meditation. In fact, before this talk, I was walking in exactly this spot along the top path. I take a walking meditation every day, being fully absorbed in the surroundings. I do find it very calming, despite knowing I was about to give a talk on Zoom. I just had a lovely walk around the garden and completely relaxed in order to do this. Yes, you can just try thinking about your breath and breathing to calm yourself. But most of all, gardens are all about sensory awareness. And there are such wonderful things in a garden to help you do this. And it's about sight, sound, smell, touch, all the senses, to be absorbed and present in the moment. Well, it's not difficult to enjoy the senses in a garden. You're surrounded by fabulous and beautiful flowers. This is a peony, of course, bowl of beauty. And here's a wonderful rhododendron. I took this picture in May. Absolutely gorgeous. You can just be absorbed in that beauty. And even the more complex structures, here's our little Japanese garden in the corner, the different colors and the light on the plants, as well as the darker corner to the right. Of course, 4 acres of natural surroundings. We've got lots and lots of wildlife, too many to photograph here, but this little robin is my friend whenever I'm digging with my wheelbarrow, and wonderful butterflies everywhere. We've planted lots of plants for butterflies and wildlife. We currently have persicarias all out over the place, covered in bees, full of bees. And every year we have a visitor. I think I mentioned this sometime before. This is how the little ducklings started off in our pond. Absolutely lovely. You see all the detail of the feathers of that duck there. And the sound of water. Wherever you go. The smells of the roses and the fragrance of some of the shrubs is very powerful and sometimes overwhelming. That Chinese lilac on the right-hand side, Microphylla superba, is just so pungent. I've deliberately planted roses which have scent, Austin roses, fabulous old English shrub roses. And the texture and shape of plants, just so much different variety. On the right-hand side, a cryptomeria, Japanese tree, and these wonderful other shapes, the fern, and so on. Here's a beautiful leaf. But there's something more to it than that, because as the seasons go by, different weathers, the details of nature are sometimes quite astonishing. Here's a cobweb surrounding with the dewdrops surrounding these dead flower heads. And even along the trees, going up the trees, the ivy and the detail of that. And every now and again, I stumble across some rotting logs, and the toadstools are quite astonishing, but quite short-lived. The other thing about photography and gardening is great fun catching different lights, different times of the day, different weathers. You get this wonderful exposure of the garden in brighter light compared to the contrast of the dark. The light in the trees, shady areas, sitting in the sunshine. Oh, have I left my gin and tonic on the seat? I think I have. And in the twilight, quite astonishing the way the sunset creates light going through the trees, the shadows. And what a joy skies can be. And it's like a movie sometimes, the way the clouds are going past with their different patterns and shapes. Fabulous sky against the twigs of the tree, branches. And we do get some amazing sunsets. What do they say? Red sky at night, shepherd's delight. Well, seasonal changes can be very interesting and colourful, particularly in the autumn, of course. The fruit on the trees starting to get frosted. And more in the winter as things decay. Still a fascinating view. Here's my favourite. Snowdrops with icicles. Well, we recently had a visit from the Royal Horticultural Society, and they had a good look at our garden, and I'm happy to say they've asked us to be a partner garden next year. We're rather pleased with that after 25 years hard work. But the assessor, the lady who came, said that, well, part of her project work now was to look at the therapeutic benefits of getting involved in horticulture, particularly with mental health in mind. Well, we've had quite a lot of experience about gardening and health in this last year or so. Why don't I just play you a short video? About 30 years ago, we had quite a serious close family bereavement, and I was quite upset by this, and this led me to a tour of Japan and Japanese gardens. I learnt about Zen meditation. I even visited the Dalai Lama in India. Well, all these experiences gave me a much better idea of how I could relax, find peace of mind, but also it gave me a totally different understanding of what gardens are all about. I suppose, like a lot of people, I wanted to have a quiet corner of my garden where I could sit and relax, even be a little bit Japanese, to remind myself of some of the principles of Buddhism that I'd learned. When we first arrived at the garden, it was just a jungle. We had a 100-foot cliff to cope with, to create paths along, and it was obviously used to be a quarry. Well, the house had been a corn mill, and there were all sorts of streams and mill races, and there was lots of water to play with, but it was quite a challenge to clear it up and get it into any sort of shape. At the time, I was rushing around the world on business, long-haul flights to the Far East and Southeast Asia, and it was pretty stressful. And I have to say that coming back home was a great joy. It was hard work, clearing the rubble and all the weeds and the jungle, but it was good, healthy exercise. I'm a great believer that gardens are meant to be sat in, and so what we've done is put around the garden about 15 benches where people can sit and relax in quiet corners, but always you can hear water running through our cascades. We open for the NGS 6 times a year, and we've found more and more people come who are looking for peace of mind and relaxation. And we get a lot of retired people and some people with mental health issues and dementia, often with carers. Well, every season brings new surprises. The hellebores in March, we have a big collection of double hellebores. The pond comes to life with Iris siracorus, lots of yellow flowers and other plants. rhododendrons in May, and a big hosta bed full of different varieties. Well, of course, in June we get roses throughout the garden, lots of old-fashioned roses, and then gladioli a little later, and then dahlias and chrysanthemums. Well, being an overweight businessman, I'd had diabetes for many years, and when I retired, I started gardening with a vengeance and got onto a healthy diet and managed to lose 20 kilos over about 6 months. Combination of gardening and vegetables and salads made a big difference to me. I brought down my blood pressure, I improved my cholesterol, and my diabetes is now under control. At the same time, my mother-in-law sadly was going through a period of cancer and undergoing cancer treatment, and she often loved to come to the garden, particularly in the summer, where she could recuperate over this time of treatment. She loves the garden and she thinks that it saved her life. Well, this wasn't a great year for me. I fell headlong into a ditch and broke my spine in 4 places. It was the most terrifying time of my life. They took me to hospital, strapped me in a metal frame halo to hold my spine into position, and for 2 or 3 months I had to stay here recuperating at home. I have to say that the first time I came back from hospital after a couple of bouts, it was just a joy to get back into my garden and to enjoy the peace, quiet, the beauty, even the sense of balance and harmony that nature gives us. Realizing that I could have died, it was quite an experience to come back and enjoy being alive, celebrating nature, and just sitting in a soothing, relaxing place, everywhere surrounded by water. Well, that was quite an experience, breaking my neck. And I can tell you, I wrote some of these things down in my diary. I said, well, nothing can prepare you to have a metal bracket screwed into your skull to support your broken neck. It was not only excruciating pain, but also total fear of having these metal screws screwed into my skull. As a footnote, never before have I felt such pain. I prayed to God and wept. So it's something I don't like to even look back on anymore, but it was a very interesting time when I learned a lot. I mean, it taught me patience. I was often strapped in this metal frame and couldn't move. I had to believe in the process. I had to let go of control. I'm not used to doing that. I've always been a manager of whatever I did. And I had to let go and let others help me. An extraordinarily good time for mental health and strength. And then that time when I went home from hospital the second time, at the end of January, I wrote a few notes. Here they are. 2 weeks of pain, fear, desperation, and loneliness. It was a very lonely time in that bed, unable to carry out the most basic functions without help. Motivation at an all-time low. Now my first walk around the garden in bright sunshine, soothing green lawns, lush evergreen ferns, fresh shingle crunches under my feet. Early snowdrops come into view. The magnificent double hellebores are starting. Suddenly my spirit lifts with a new determination to survive. Well, I still have that note in my diary, and it's I find it quite exhilarating now. Well, as I said, the RHS have been encouraging horticultural projects, particularly for disaffected young people or those with mental difficulties. A lot of them people struggling as the aftermath of COVID, of course, lacking confidence, even the mentally handicapped. And they found that getting involved in gardening projects can be a very positive escape from stress. connect with other people as a team. Of course, there's lots of physical stuff going on in gardening. Let off steam and get rid of that anger, and develop a sense of pride, feel a sense of accomplishment. So my conclusion, definitely, and experience, is that being involved in a meaningful activity such as a horticultural project is a prerequisite for good mental health. And the other thing is about plants, the healing benefits of tending plants. I was involved in Unilever, which I found a very political place to work, quite threatening. And my favorite saying, when people say, well, why did you retire from that into the garden? I say, well, plants don't fight back. Certainly you can get a sense of stability and self-worth, some grounding. It starts to become very meaningful as the garden develops. And it's wonderful watching plants grow. No better therapy than that. With the problem solving, concentration, of course, that helps you focus and be able to live more in the present. And that's a pretty important thing, to get rid of all the junk in your mind and have a healthier emotional life. Well, my take on all this is that it certainly is a stress breaker, gardening, and growing plants is so relaxing, and I find that very beneficial. Relieving tension from a hectic work schedule. When I used to come back from those long-haul flights from China, where I had an office, it was a joy to have a few weeks break and get into the garden. But it also, as I've explained in previous talks, the garden was my teacher. It allowed me to discover quite a few things about myself and sort them out. Nothing like the ability to connect with nature. Well, years ago, 1996 or so, I had a great friend, Jan. His name was Jan. He was Turkish, and he helped me in my business world to sort out positive thinking in our business, in the factory. But it can easily be applied to working in the garden, because certainly in the workplace, whether it be horticultural or otherwise, you can get a sense of dignity from that work, a sense of yourself, who you are, and a sense of belonging. Having a purpose and developing a purpose within your team gives you an identity and a sense of meaning. So I'm quite clear that gardening is really good for spiritual well-being, and that's our slogan here at Cascades Gardens. And you've seen before my propagating polytunnel full of seeds and cuttings. I've had extraordinary good luck this year with cuttings. The weather has been quite good. It's relaxing, it's satisfying. It's a way of shutting out the stresses of modern life. And although I can't give a demonstration today on bonsai, we've certainly been developing the bonsai nursery. And certainly the whole thing is giving an artistic creation of a tree, keeping it alive, making it healthy. Here's a Chinese elm that I've got from a wholesaler that had brought in a number of Japanese and Chinese trees. And it's a really good meditation to be pruning and clipping such a thing. You can see the flow that has been developed in the trunk, which gives that sense of flow. Here's some hornbeams. And a hawthorn, Chinese hawthorn. It's quite old, that one. And I've discovered the ficus tree. This is a frost tender tree. Apparently, the much bigger versions of these were the sort of thing that the Buddha sat under in Sarnath in India. Same species of plant. Notice the aerial roots on that. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? Well, one thing for sure, however hard you have to work to maintain your garden, gardens are meant to be sat in. And I can't encourage that more. And as I've said many times before, I'm quite clear we're all part of nature, and connecting with nature is excellent. Reducing stress, bringing you down to earth in a beautiful place. It can be a landscape, it can be our own gardens. But I've always been aware of this idea of harmony and balance that a natural environment gives you. And that's what encourages us to have inner peace. Well, we've got lots of places to sit in Cascades. Here's one that we call this the Japanese pot garden, featuring our wonderful new gift of the Buddha, which has arrived this summer, Indian Buddha in the background. Catalpa bignanoides, the tree. Lots of aces and cryptomerias. Here's a picture of the shade garden. A rose arbor. And our new Kerasansui garden, raked gravel garden, which I was inspired by the Daisen-in garden in Kyoto. We're letting the children get access to the rake, and they're creating some really nice patterns. Still a very peaceful place, an empty garden. The tufa arch with the waterfall. The miscanthus grass is now taking over a bit in the front, but it gives a lovely flow in the breeze. And one of my favorite spots is this quiet corner where you're surrounded by rocks, and you can hear the water just coming down in the cliff face. Lots of walkways high up over the quarry. And always surrounded by lots of perennial flowers, a lush planting. Wonderful places to sit. Well, let's look at meditation, because certainly we find our garden is an ideal place to meditate. And everyone's aware of breathing meditation, I'm sure, but I do find this very helpful whenever I'm sitting in one of our meditation seats, to just start the process of focusing on the breath, counting outward cycles of breath, and trying to really maintain a clear mind, and not grasping passing thoughts, always bringing it back to the breath. Here's an aid that I find to take you deeper into yourself. I picked up this bell in Tibet many years ago. And as it gradually gets quieter and quieter, it can take you into yourself. I find that quite a good technique. One of my favorite meditations is, I call it the sunshine meditation, but it's the purification meditation in all the textbooks. And the whole point is that when you exhale in meditation, you exhale and get rid of all the negative things in your life, past mistakes, distorted perceptions and emotions, and so on. And on the in-breath, you're soaking up the sunshine. You're breathing in white light, positive energy, feeling relaxed, light and blissful. I was told the Dalai Lama liked this meditation, particularly on a personal basis. Perhaps he does it for the world. And always at the end with a dedication to pass blessings on to others. And the great thing in the garden when you meditate is that there's so many wonderful, beautiful things to create as an object, an image of your meditation, a focus to calming the mind. So one of the things that I've struggled with, maybe you can help me with this, maybe we have the same issues, is that it's so easy for the mind to run away and attach itself to your worries. Often it's about what's going to happen next, the future, and planning for the future. But I don't know about you, but as I get older, in my 70s here, there's so many things crowded in my mind, remembering things of the past, things I feel a bit guilty about that I regret and so on. And this often crowds my mind. Always I try to get back to the breath and keep on course with the meditation. And looking at attachments, well, what do they include? It's all those desires and wants and needs, hatred, jealousy, lust, anger, all that sort of stuff that really can be quite dominating in the brain if you're not careful. Some people have very strong views and opinions that keep coming back, routines and systems, but always it's under the influence of the way we have this dualistic way of thinking of being the self in this outside world that we observe. Quite a nice phrase I found in a book the other day: to learn whatever you are attached to is not so heavy, just a bit of cloud, it can be blown away by the breeze. Quite a nice way of thinking about that. Well, I said, when I was writing this, I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, attachments. Who do I know about attachments? And I cast my mind back to my university days, 1970. And I was speaker finder for one of the clubs. And of course, it was everywhere. It was all about the Beatles and their music and their introduction of new ideas. The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was the guru of the day. Maybe you remember that. I was lucky enough to get him in to give us a talk to the university. His talk was all about realizing the state of non-attachment. I still have the papers and my notes about it. And he says, well, being able to find techniques to be non-attached is the firmest guarantee of success in life. Lots of flowery, positive language in those days, providing a solid foundation of eternal freedom. Wow. And I found my notes of the day in my old diary, and I still don't really understand it. He said, attachment causes detachment. And if you don't expect something, you can't be disappointed. The more possessions we have, the more we have to lose. And as our possessions are destroyed, so are our minds. I couldn't help laughing a little bit in that when I greeted him when he arrived at the university, I was pleased to meet him, of course, and we shook hands. And he had just got out of a fantastic Rolls Royce, driven by the most beautiful young woman with a peaked hat. And I couldn't help feeling that something wasn't quite right there. Perhaps much more interesting and fun, I used to attend a lot of the Dalai Lama's talks in London and the UK, where the team at the Tibet Society and I used to arrange them. He often talked about his earlier experiences mending watches. I don't know whether you know about that, but one of his hobbies was to mend watches. And he often would tell this story. Well, here I was mending this watch, and it was very complicated, and I couldn't quite get it to work. And I didn't know what to do, so I used to pick it up and bang it on the table. And then, of course, it smashed. And he said, well, this is one way of dealing with anger and seeing the futility of my actions. I've never forgotten that story. Well, I told you in an earlier talk that I had first experienced Japanese meditation, Soto Zen meditation, at Heiji Monastery in Japan. Fascinating place in the woods. I've shown you this picture before. And yes, meditation was lining up against a wall. And interestingly, it was not so much about trying to seek nirvana or enlightenment, not to try to go beyond what we are, but to come to terms with what we are and the way we are now, to find our Buddha nature. So not to change our state of mind, but accept the one we were in. Be open to the present, let go. And I found that quite fascinating and interesting, and I tried to apply that. Looking at the research from this particular Zen master, I shan't try and pronounce his name, but he was basically saying it's not particularly focusing on the breath, it's not seeking an altered state. We just sit in a state of conscious awareness, mindfulness, reflecting directly on the reality of life. If your state of mind is in harmony, you will understand the true Zen, the Buddha nature. And certainly an interesting snippet in the book, I saw great meditators have said about meditation, just be still and know. Well, the two schools of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism in Japan, are the Soto Zen and Rinzai school. And I think in many ways, the Rinzai school had that special magic that we think of as Zen Buddhism, in that they not only do the meditation that I described, but they rely on koans, the different stories, dialogues, questions, statements, which sort of provoke the student, provoke great doubt, test the student's progress. And of course, we all know that question, well, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And there we are. In my travels in Kyoto, went to a number of different monasteries, and Roanji was one that was particularly fascinating. And we may all be familiar with this picture of the meditation platform there on the right, looking over this amazing garden. Yes, it can be the sea, an ocean with islands in the middle. Yes, it can be, as I described last time, mountains sticking through the clouds at 10,000 feet plus. But basically, it's about emptiness. Emptiness in the sense that there's nothing there, but also to give the student, the monks, the opportunity to sit, relax, and meditate on the emptiness of self. And we try to create our own Karasan Sui garden. It's very simple, but it's the same idea. A very quiet, relaxing garden. It's not confused with lots of plants and flowers. It's challenging analytical meditation to realize the emptiness of our concept of self, our lack of inherent existence. Now, there's not time for me to try to go into that in any detail now. I'm going to give it a go in my 5th talk. I've always enjoyed Tibetan prayers. Of course, Oma Om, Om Mani Padme Hum, and things like that. I have a prayer which is about the long life, wishing for a long life. Om Tara Tu Tara Tire Soha. And I often chant that at the top of my cliff in front of this little black Buddha friend that I have and I've known for 25 years. But the most exciting and interesting and spiritual chanting that I ever heard, I found at 7,000 feet up in the northern Himalayas in India. I did a visit. I stumbled upon in fact, the Gutu Tantric Monastery in Tenzinggang. I was delivering aid to the Tibetan settlement there in Tenzinggang in 2002, and I stumbled on this monastery. Quite extraordinary. Well, I think you'll agree that I've never heard anything like that before. I found it a very spiritual experience, right up at 7,000 feet in the Himalayas. Well, finishing my talk now, Cascades Gardens, the one meditation that I enjoy most of all, most nights I go out after dinner and I sit in a particular seat overlooking the garden. You can see the view here in front of the Buddha. And I wrote a few words the other day. During the day, the huge cliffs at Cascades Gardens absorb the sunshine and radiate back the energy into the garden when the sun goes down. At twilight, this energy, heavy silence and stillness gives the garden a deeply spiritual feeling, the perfect place to be one with nature. And as the evening goes on, wonderful sunsets. Here you can see the picture. I often wait for this time when everything is in sort of 3D relief. It has a magic of its own. And as it gets dark, it's quite a spiritual place. Well, that's my talk. If you want to know more about the garden, our website, cascadesgardens.com, has a lot of interesting pictures, different seasons, and my video blog, gardenforwellbeing.com. As Banti said, we're offering now 2-day retreats with the B&B and the garden. It's a wonderful place to relax and find peace. And the next 2 talks I have, this is the third. The next one is a video tour of the Cascades Gardens through the summer. We've been having great fun taking drone photography. I have a friend with this wonderful drone that has this camera, and we can get all sorts of interesting shots of the garden. And I will next time definitely do a simple bonsai demonstration. Well, in November, my last talk, I've been rather building up to this. It's also something that I've been wanting to develop for a long time. I want to summarize a lifetime of overseas travel and teachings that I've attended, so many over the years, and try to briefly try to get to grips with the concept of emptiness meditation, and look at the findings of quantum physics as they are now from an ontological perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alan. And may I just start by mentioning how beautiful those pictures were of Cascade Gardens. It was so serene just to watch them included in the presentation. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to direct towards Alan, now is the time for you to ask any questions. But I would like to just start off myself. Alan, being a person who would visit a garden, we enjoy your work, your hard work. But as the person who sort of narrates a script of what your garden has become today, how do you balance that emotion, that sort of that mind where you can enjoy the garden and at times exclude what has to be done, and then that moment where you have to put in the work? How do you mind that position?
Well, I'm a natural boss, you see. I have a team. And so fortunately now at this age, and with the number of visitors we have to the garden, it does pay for a team of gardeners. And now I set a time at 4 o'clock, and I go off for a rest, and I sit in what we call seat 2, which is the view of the Buddha. And then later in the evening, I have my twilight meditation. So, and following that walk in the morning when no one's around. So I make time, and I enjoy doing that.
Wonderful. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, you can unmute yourself or sort of use the expression emojis to signal to us that you have questions you would like to ask. Alan, now with regards to the vibrational aspect and the effect that it has on your garden, on a garden, on a plant, we have a lot of studies about it. There are a couple of studies even conducted by Harvard and Yale universities about the vibrations and how that affects the garden. How does that in any way apply to the work that you do with cascades?
Well, I touched on this in a previous talk, that I do believe in energy, the chi of a garden, and I get quite a few spiritual people who come to the garden who actually even identify the areas in the garden where the energy is its greatest. A Reiki master the other day said, "Oh, there's definitely a rush of energy between the Buddha statue and one of the waterfalls." So I'm conscious that there is a very positive energy here, and I think that's beneficial. One of the things in a garden is to make sure you don't block that energy with lots of obstacles, trees and shrubs in the wrong place, and we paid some attention to that.
So would that make, for example, for a person having a home garden, having a large boundary of trees all around the garden by the boundary, would that make it not advisable in that sense?
Well, I think having plenty of fresh air, the ability for sunshine to come into your garden, these are important aspects. I know sometimes you're not allowed to take trees down, but I've been able to do that in my 4 acres, not to create barriers within the garden, having some open space, and so on. Just don't make it too cluttered.
Yes, of course. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask Alan?
Well, I'm looking for advice and help from someone in the audience who can help me get rid of my attachments.
Hello, Alan. I'm Sudhanta. I have a question for you.
Hello.
Alan, I've always been fascinated by flowing water, and you have plenty of flowing water in Cascades. Is it correct that the frequency of sound of flowing water resonates with the frequency of the heart?
Well, I'm not scientifically qualified to answer that question, but I do know how soothing it is to just have a certain amount of dripping water. It's not the big heavy waterfalls. It's that very peaceful dripping. I showed you in that video. That's my meditation spot. We call it seat 5, where the water's just running and trickling down the hillside. And that is so peaceful and relaxing compared to the heavier waterfalls,
Yes.
But I mean, I think there was something about that meditation in the Gutu monks in Tenzing Gang. There's some sort of vibration there of the sound that totally resonates through my body and makes me feel very spiritual.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you, Alan. I really enjoyed Cascades tour all over again. I watched it earlier too, but it's fascinating and it's well worth listening every time and watching. Thank you for that. And thank you for your very wonderful spiritual life, which a full life well lived. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, when I was in Singapore, this Singaporean monk told me, we were talking about bonsai, bonsais, and I'm sure you'll be speaking on it next week. He was telling me that having a bonsai at home is bad luck because it is essentially the crippling of a tree. What do you have? What is your? I've never heard that before, right? But what do you think?
Well, yes, this idea of crippling, not crippling, but restraining a tree.
Training.
But please don't blame me. In the 12th century, the Japanese invented this idea, and they did want to bring trees into their homes because they revered nature. All I can say is that with bonsai, and I'll touch on this next month, is that most bonsai trees, they did start off as landscapes, by the way. I'll show you one of those next time. But the tree, you have to understand the horticulture of trees to make sure that it's healthy and well kept. So, you're not trying to kill a tree. You're not trying to be detrimental to the tree. And you have to care for it. And most of the time, they are outdoor trees, which should be outside of the home, not inside. They don't survive inside because they get too dry. You do have to water it very regularly, perhaps almost every day in the summer. So you're actually putting a lot of attention to the tree. You're caring for the tree. You're loving the tree. And so I don't see that as a criticism. It's a worship of nature, if you like. It's an appreciation of the beauty of nature.
Anyone else who would like to ask any questions? Maybe, Alan, you could ask our audience some questions because today was mindfulness meditation, wasn't it? And our audience, most of them are meditators.
Excuse me, please.
And Sujata.
Yeah, I just have a question. That is, can I
Yes.
speak now, please? Yeah, I'm Sujata here. I have some freesia plants, but I don't know how to look after them properly. Can you just give me some tips, please, Alan?
Well, freesias aren't my speciality. I tend to focus on perennial flowers, which are outdoor plants. Yes. But I mean, horticulture is often has similar principles. That if you're giving the plant too much water, too much sunshine, too much heat, it's not going to survive just as much as not watering it and leaving it out in the cold. So you have to really have a look at what are the conditions you're keeping these freesias. Is it outside? Is it inside? Are they getting the right nourishment? Are they getting sunshine? Are they getting the right amount of water? Not being too dry. You just have to, they say right plant, right place, don't they?
They have a tendency to droop all the time. Is it that's the nature of the plant, or what's it?
Say that again.
They're drooping. The flowers are drooping, yeah.
Well, that sounds like they're not getting enough nutrients or water from the soil. But without actually being there, I can't really go further.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Anyway, thank you. I just got an idea of what it's going to be. I think it's too much. Sometimes it's too much sunshine, and at certain times I don't water them.
Well, I think that's your answer.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Sujata, you can go take your pot and go see Alan at Cascades.
It's a huge thing. I can't carry it here. I can actually show him if he's interested. Yeah.
No. Not right now.
Not now. Maybe some other time. Thank you very much, Bhante. Thanks a lot.
Dil, yes, you have a question, Dil.
Well, it's a part of a question, but it's also a lot about what this talk and the beautiful the presentation did to me. So, Alan, I just want to thank you because your passion and your vision certainly carried me, as I'm sure it did everyone else who was here, because I realized that that was one of the things that you wanted to inspire and motivate it. And while you showed us was beautiful, the majestic, the Himalayas, as well as the vistas of the showed us the of Tibet, and then the small, much more miniature Japanese garden that made you inspired. I also liked your beautiful. What was it? A definition of a vision, whatever it is, that if you can plan it, it's not a vision. And this is what I would like to just hear. It's not so much a question, but what you feel about it. So, what my experience has been, just like what you were describing, that in these moments of stillness, when you are one with nature, absorbed in it, and when you really observe it, in these times where there's a trickling of water or the play of light on something, or it's a different seasonal changes, or the icicles on the snowdrops, or the butterflies and the birds that come in, and all these things, on one hand, it's a meditative silence and going inside, but it's also in another way, it's a sensory kind of overload of a lot of colors and sounds and things, and it all comes in together, and it opens up a vista. And this whole thing about this stillness, and you ended up with the sunyata. Your last talk is also going to be, and I'm just waiting to hear it, and about all what quantum physics is saying, but also the fact that these moments, or these aha moments, or this oneness with nature, sort of or seeing the sky or sunset and all these other things that you showed us, they also inspire to this infinite creativity and dynamism and possibilities and all these kind of things that makes one really, really create. In your case, it has been this beautiful garden of nature, which is bringing so much of healing to others as well as yourself. But others do music and other fantastic things. They write poetry. So what is your understanding as how this moment of stillness, that it expands? On one side, it stills you into nothingness and to sunyata, but on the other side, the byproduct of that, almost, or side effect of, is that you can do fantastic things that the human mind just can't do, because you can create things, you can, with these visions, and do these wonderful things you're doing. So how do you see that as part and parcel of one?
Okay, well, that was a long question, so I'm not quite sure exactly what you want from me, but I do find that being still and having peace of mind and listening to the universe, you get you get the answers to a lot of questions that were troubling you, even if it's a delayed response. Whilst the peace of meditation in a natural space can help you resolve some of these issues, can get rid of these attachments that I was talking about, and can also take you inside of yourself to look at, as they say, don't they, the true nature of reality, the emptiness of self, and all that. I will touch on that in my last talk. I do think that nature helps you go into yourself. I think the enclosure of my small gardens, lots of little gardens, corners, makes you feel safe, relaxes you. Women say this to me, particularly when they visit, and that it does heal. So I think you've got all these things going on, and it's wonderful to be able to link all these things and understand them within a beautiful garden.
Thank you. That is, yes, I mean, you get inspired like that. And in my life, and certainly in my daughter's life, all her creative things that people always ask her, how on earth does she do that? Because she's much more scientific and more medically oriented, but she can also do, quite diverse creative things. And in every moment, she has to have a sunset. Sometimes it's when the moon rises and into a dark night. And then she does these things that she's never been taught or never done. So I've always wondered how she does that. And hearing it from you, that's why I wanted that. And I'm also very grateful that when you refer to Nelson Mandela and Our Deeper Sphere, that you did bring The Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, because lots of people don't connect the two, and they're to be all to Nelson Mandela. And it was nice that you said that. Actually, now they're saying that it originated from Marianne Williamson, Return to Love. And I was also reminded of William Blake's poem, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wildflower, and hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. And that kind of embodied that, in this one moment, you can see eternity and the vastness and the creativity which you have demonstrated. So I just want to thank you that it has been a marvelous experience for me, and you certainly have made me inspired and rested and peaceful, and really given me a passion and a vision which had inspired me during this 1.5 hours of talk, but also just recollecting it will give me lots of stillness and calmness and clarity. So thank you very much. And I look forward to listening to your other 2 talks.
Happy to help.
Thank you very much, Dale. Sudhanta, I see that your mic is unmuted. Do you have another question?
No.
Oh,
No, Bhante. No, I don't have another question.
Okay. So we are out of time. Devika. Yes, Devika.
Yes, I just want to express my thoughts. It was a beautiful garden, Alan. So all I can say, thank you for sharing it with all this information. It's so beautiful. If we ever get to come to your part of the world, we will definitely visit, because we live in the US, and it was beautiful. I've been following your presentations. I just want to tell you how beautiful it is. And it is so nice.
I'm glad you've enjoyed them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devika, for your kind comments. And thank you everyone else, for everyone who pitched in and came up with your questions. You have made the session all the more wholesome and lively. Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you. Special thanks to your son, who is by your side supporting you as well for the talk. And we are looking forward to your presentation next month. And just thank you so much. Your garden is so inspirational, and it's so inspirational to see, from what you used to do as a high-flying corporate person, and now sort of a Zen garden master in a way. It is quite a fascinating journey for all of us, Alan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Banti. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So we will be having a session again next month. I hope that you will be able to join. Alan is having some very unique sort of presentations happening with the drone cameras and all of that. So we will be sending out the email, letting all of you know the date and times, which is, as we usually do, the first Saturday of the month at 12 p.m. UK time. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you very much, Alan, again. And we will see you next month. Take care and have a lovely rest of the day. Goodbye.
Ante, thank you very much.